Alright, so today I've decided to go back to my origins. This channel got bigger and bigger on my using that phrase, the phrase that pays. Nobody wants to work anymore. And today, while I was sitting here thinking of video ideas, I came up with why not do a search for this particular topic? If I'm going to reinvent myself, you don't reinvent the wheel. You just start with what works and you make it work. And obviously, people really like this topic. And of course, I handed it to the AI, and this is an AI generated script. So I'm going to read through the script. You guys are going to listen to my talking points, and that's what we're going to do today. Thank you for the bunch of people who came over to subscribe on YouTube last night. It was really heartwarming to see you guys all coming back to the channel, even if it's only 15. And you got to start somewhere. And let's get into this video. They say nobody wants to work anymore. You probably heard it from frustrated employers, read it on social media, or even experienced it in your own job search. But is that really the truth? Today, we're diving deep into the real reason behind this claim, and it's not what you think. These scripts all sound alike, don't they? Alright, first talking point. Let's get one thing straight. It's not that people don't want to work, it's that people don't want to work just anywhere under any conditions. The world has changed and so have our expectations for what a job should be. But before we go any further, let's take a look at where this idea comes from. The whole idea that people don't want to work doesn't take into consideration that anyone out there will do just about anything for money as long as it's the right price. If you offer me $350,000 to flip burgers, wash cars, paint your toenails, whatever you want, I'm going to do that job. And I'm going to whistle while I do it because I don't care. What people really want is to be comfortable. No one wants to be struggling for the minimum wage. Remember, put the fries in the bag, little bro, is just another way of saying the wagey can't do anything better, and that's why they're there. That's why they're in that situation, because that's all they can do, and because that's all they can do, they don't want to pay you anything. I've said this 100 times on the channel. The real minimum wage is no wage at all. The narrative that nobody wants to work anymore has been gaining traction, especially in recent years. Employers are frustrated. They claim there's a lack of work ethic, that people are too picky, or that they simply don't want to put in the effort. But let's flip the script for a moment and consider this from another angle. As I've always said, you pretend to pay me, I pretend to work. Talking point number 3. The real issue isn't about people being unwilling to work. It's about the kind of work environment they're being asked to endure. For too long, toxic workplace, disrespectful hiring practices, and poor compensation have been the norm. And now, more than ever, people are refusing to accept it. Jobs, no possibility for promotion. I think that's one of the most toxic things that you can have at any corporation, is a job that has no forward momentum. There's no senior, there's no principal, there's just the position. And at the Evil Corp I work at, it's intentional to keep workers from using their titles that they've gained in order to go somewhere else to do a job and get paid more money. And as I've said this before, the job interview is just a test to see how desperate you are. My latest hire is one of the most desperate people I've ever met in the workplace. If I asked this guy to go clean the toilet with his own toothbrush and then brush his teeth with it afterwards, he would do it. And it frightens me to say that. And also, when it comes to poor compensation, realizing that even if you get this job, the compensation is so bad, this can't be your only job. Taking this job means you have to have a second or third job, and no one wants to do that. It's bad enough that we have to go to one place we don't like being at, but having to go to 2 or 3 and just barely scraping by for food and shelter, you're going to do this to yourself? These aren't isolated incidents. More and more job seekers are countering companies that seem to care more about testing their desperation than their skills or potential. You know how you test someone's desperation? Is by wondering how low of an hourly wage you can get them to take. Because I just had this conversation with someone yesterday who asked, if I get this job, how much more can I ask above the minimum wage? And I said, not much, because they're looking for a minimum wage worker. But they will uh, they will place a salary or hourly wage in the job description that's on a scale, or even worse is that current employers won't put an actual value in there. And they do this so that when people come in to interview for the job, most of us aren't going to go interview for a minimum wage job. And so when we get there and it turns out that it was a minimum wage job after commuting, interviewing, and then waiting for the call, you have to like sit back, take a deep gulp, and wonder, why did I do this? Why does this company believe that I'm willing to take this humiliating job for next to nothing? And honestly, that's the way they like it. These deceptive practices have been going on for years, where they want to test whether or not you really want the job. And I felt incredibly disrespected in many situations in interviews. I've even had the people in the interview get upset with me because I asked them how much it paid. And the lead interviewer looked at me and said, that's not part of this job interview. He said, that's something you discuss with HR. And he was really offended. And I was glad when that guy didn't call me back, because if he's like that in the job interview, can you imagine working for someone with that kind of attitude about compensation? Let's talk about the term desperation filter. Some employers desperately create stressful, disrespectful interview processes to see who's tough enough to endure it. But in reality, they're filtering out the people who value their time and self respect. What they're left with are those who are desperate or willing to put up with mistreatment. And that's where the real problem lies. I've been in this job interview. My current job was that interview. I went, I interviewed for what I thought was the job. Then I started, and then they added the phrase extra tasks as necessary to the job. And that just meant they could include anything they wanted in the job. And if you didn't want to do those 5 extra jobs, then they would tell you your your work performance is too low here, and we're going to fire you because you signed up for one thing, and then what you got was something completely different. And if this hadn't happened to me at every single job that I've ever had in my life, I I'd be shocked. But it has. You're pulling cables, you're sitting in for the receptionist, you're doing security, you're moving furniture, you're cleaning tables, you're cleaning windows. They've got you even in the bathroom because this company decided that for in order to save money, it was going to fire all the janitors. And you're like, well, who's going to do it? Guess what? Go look in the mirror and tell me who's going to do that job. And they love doing this because it saves them so much money. You turn everyone in your company into a janitor, and therefore you eliminate a position that every company needs. And I've seen them do that to jobs like when I was at the university. They decided to cut all the janitors and bring in an outside corporation and that would just hire your people for less money and put them on an annual contract, so at any point you could just get rid of them. And it was one of the most evil things I had experienced in the workplace up until that point. So yesterday, while I was talking to this girl, she just had an interview at a call center on the other side of town. And she told me that she loves going to job interviews because she considers it an acting job. She considers it to be an audition for a character that's not her. Kind of like the way that I run this channel. The reason I don't let people see this channel is because I don't want them to see this character and think that This is actually the way that Millennial Steen behaves when he's at home shaking hands with the governor. No, it's all an act, and that's what it is on their part and on your part. And she said that she was so into the job interview that she would get the company logo tattooed above her rear end if that was necessary in order to get the job. But filtering out those who won't work for free is also something that the corporation has to put out there, right? Because if they're going to put you on salary and you're expecting to work 40 hours a week on salary for a certain price, and then it turns out that you can't do that job in 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, 70 hours a week, for the original salary and not a penny more, they'll do that to you. I mean, I knew a guy that was working 100 hours a week in order to keep his job, 7 days a week, 10 to 15 hours a day. And the guy still couldn't get enough work done in order to keep his job. Eventually, he got fired for poor work performance, and they had to make that job three different jobs. And guess what all three of those jobs had in common? They were all part time with no benefits. And so when you're looking to find your workers, mistreatment is the way that the workplace functions. Think about how often you've been treated like you were a child in the workplace, and then when you act your wage, they get incredibly hurt because they're like, you're so unprofessional. You know what's unprofessional? My pay. And then they just look at you like, well, that's what the job pays. And this is what I've been told over and over again. You saw what the job paid. Now act your wage. And then they throw their hands up in the air and think, well, if we're going to pay this guy like a kid, and then he treats the job like a kid, where's the disconnect? Why can't we pay people with child-sized paychecks and get adult-sized work? Because it doesn't work that way, and it won't sink into them that money directly impacts our daily lives, how we live, how we are outside of work, and what we dream about at night. I dream about being homeless all the time because I know that with the compensation that I'm being paid, it's only a matter of time before you get thrown out of your job for poor work performance and you hit the street. That's where most of us are going to end up once we lose our crummy prole jobs because the proletariat doesn't have capital to fall back on. If we had the means in order to be able to support ourselves without working, no one in their right mind would work for any of these corporations, hands down. People want to work, but they want to work in environments where they're respected, valued, and fairly compensated. They want jobs that offer more than just a paycheck. They want dignity, work life balance, and a sense of purpose. Dignity while dressing you up in a clown suit or providing you an employee handbook on how you should act, dress, and perform at work, the size of your nails, that doesn't sound like dignity to me. Work life balance, they want you working yourself to the bone. There is no work life balance. I actually read an article about this a few months ago where I think it was the CEO of a gym said that these Gen Zers that are coming out here hoping to travel and have work life balance isn't possible in today's competitive workplace. In fact, I read an article, I think it was Thursday, that talked about how Gen Z wants a workday that's 9 to 1 p.m. because no one works after lunch anyway. It's not that you're working, it's that you're sitting there. And this is something my boss says to me all the time. It's like, I don't care where you are as long as you're sitting in your seat at work. That's all they want. And I think it's humiliating because they know that at a certain point during the day, every single employee cuts out mentally. I think if I had to guess, it would be between 1 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon where we just sit there and look at the clock. Because the work release program for the proletariat isn't so much about keeping them there and productive, it's about keeping them there and away from other things, their family, their friends, their enjoyment. There's a certain evilness to the way that our society functions in the sense that there is no work life balance. I mean, right now, I'm pretty much at the end of my weekend. And did I get anything done? Did I enjoy myself in any conceivable way? No. In fact, I was so angry about going back to work tomorrow that I drank until 5 o'clock in the morning today. I just couldn't close my eyes and feel good about having to go to work on Monday because there is no purpose to our lives other than to live to work. And I've heard this from so many different people. I was at the gym the other day, and the girl that swipes the card said this to me. I want to get to a point in my life where I can just work as little as humanly possible. I don't want to live to work. And that's a very common expression that I've heard throughout my entire life is people are uninterested in the way that the workplace functions. And yet Evil Corp, your boss, your supervisor, your manager, whoever, when they find people that think this way, logically, they don't understand. They think you're broken because to them, all you are is an NPC that shows up every single day, sits down in that chair, does the same thing every single day. And when the robot won't do what it's told, there's just looks of not understanding. It's like, what's wrong with the NPC? He's not doing what he's supposed to do. And that's because he has checked out mentally. And this is what people do when they put in their 2 weeks. They no longer care. In fact, I was just talking to a Starbucks girl, and she was that way. It's like my last day's Thursday. And I told her not to put in her 2 weeks, but she insisted because it's the right thing to do. So the next time you hear someone say nobody wants to work anymore, remember this. It's not about laziness or entitlement. It's about a shift in priorities. People are no longer willing to sacrifice their well-being for a job that doesn't respect them. And honestly, can you blame them? I don't blame anyone who quits a job. Firing your current employer because you can't take it anymore, because the job is stressful, it doesn't pay enough, your coworkers are toxic, the management is even worse than your coworkers, and you have money saved up, leave. No one should be forced to stay in a job that sucks. And every time I walk into a Walmart, I'm reminded that not everyone has the ability to say no to a crummy job. You look at the employees inside of any retail place, any warehouse, any restaurant, they're miserable. Why? Because their life is directly impacted by the nature of daily work that isn't good for them. So here's my closing. The world of work is changing, and it's about time. If employers want to stay relevant, they need to adapt. Because the truth is, people do want to work. They just want to work somewhere worth their time and effort. I've been saying this for years. No one that's part of the proletariat can afford not to work. But if we get to choose where we work, we want the easiest job for the maximum amount of money. People are willing to take less money for less stress. But we still have to work. We can never get rid of the work requirement. That's part of being human. If you want to live as a human being, you've got to work unless you're rich or you won the lottery or you're dating someone with a lot of money. Otherwise, you have to work. And work has to be a place where we want to be at least a little bit. Desperation work is the hardest kind of work, and I see it on the face of the delivery driver every single day when it's 110 degrees and there's no air conditioning in his truck. He's not there delivering those packages to me because he wants to. He has to. He has a family, he's got kids, he's got a house, he's got a car. That's how they get you. That's how society gets you. That's the number one reason why I've never wanted a car in my life is because I knew that once I got that car, my life was going to require this much money in order for me to continue being able to drive. Once I lose that money, the first thing that's going to go is that car. The second is me out onto the street. That's just the way life functions. We're supposed to just put our heads down and go to work. But it's not that we will ever be happy with work. It's about finding some sort of way of dealing with work. And for me, I deal with it in a very negative way. For you, you probably God only knows what you guys are doing out there, but anyone that listens to this channel and is at work right now, you're my hero.